question, what is philosophy, comes up a lot. I mean, at least for philosophers. It's a pretty foundational question in the history of philosophy. One of my favorite answers to the question is Socrates' utterance before he drinks the hemlock in the Phaedo. He says philosophy is preparation for dying. Philosophy is learning to die. And there's a whole series of arguments about the nature of the soul and its existence apart from the body. And there are different ways to understand what that might mean. It's too easy to caricature Plato as a two-world dualist, while we do have to admit that on some interpretations, the eternal forms, the divine ideas, are set so far apart from and above and beyond the world of mere appearances, images, sensations, perceptions, and our beliefs and opinions about them. Sometimes these ideas are placed so far beyond that Plato can seem like an idealist, but there are many attempts to articulate what is meant by a form in Plato's dialogues, and there are many strong criticisms of the very idea of an idea in Plato's dialogues. All the best criticisms of Plato's ideas are in Plato's dialogues. And so, that presents us with a problem, or at least it prescribes a method that when we engage in philosophy, we need to do so dialectically, or better, dialogically, which is to say that contradiction is just part of how you play the game. Philosophy is less about saying that this is true and that is false than it is about a movement through falsehood toward the truth. So it is more of an initiatory process than it is a merely epistemic exercise, where the goal would be to know truth and to distinguish it from falsehood. Because Plato often resorts to myths, right, in the midst of his dialogues in order to illustrate something that logic cannot prove. And so he resorts to likely stories. So what does that mean? Well, it means that philosophy is more than just an intellectual pursuit. It's a form of ascesis, right? A form of practice, of exercise, which involves one bodily and psychologically, as well as spiritually, in the pursuit of wisdom. And what is that? Well, I really like what John Vervaeke has shared with us about wisdom as having a lot to do with relevance and sort of ascending hierarchies of relevance. Wisdom is a way of being, right? It's not a knowledge about. It is a way or a mode of being. And there's knowledge in there too, but it's a knowledge through participation rather than a knowledge through representation. So what is philosophy? Philosophy is the love of wisdom. And in loving wisdom, I think we have to avoid debates. Because if we're debating, we're holding truth and falsehood opposed, as if it might be possible to arrive at the truth without first moving through the false. Right? So we need dialectic and not debate. Otherwise, we're not doing philosophy. Some philosophers turn it around, and instead of saying that philosophy is the love of wisdom, they say that philosophy is the wisdom of love. And love, I think, is not unrelated to death, which is to say that there is something mortal that is intrinsic to the amorous, right? Here I'm alluding to something Deleuze says in Difference in Repetition about learning, right? That it is learning is both mortal and amorous. It relates both to love and to death. Because to learn, we have to transform, right? And to transform is, as Goethe said, to die and become. And so what is the wisdom of love? Well, it's not unrelated to Socrates' sense that philosophy is learning to die, right? The wisdom of love is a way of life led in relationship with death, where despite the inevitable loss of one's own egoic identity, despite the aging and eventual decay of the body, there's nonetheless an affirmation not only of life, but of a life in love. Desire for the body, it's great, nothing wrong with that, but that's not the same as love. It's not the wisdom of love that I'm here speaking to. There is a higher form of love, right? Agape, if you will, and it's not a bodily thing. Because it includes and transcends the fact of death and the fact of the decay of the body. The body is corruptible, right? And what's desirable one day is not so desirable the next. Whereas love is love. It's eternal. So the wisdom of love, as another way of answering this question of what is philosophy, is the wisdom of love. It is a relationship to death, and it is a pursuit of the wisdom of love despite the death of the body. We don't know really what happens to our personality, to our ego after we die. We don't know. Socrates says we don't know. We don't know for sure if there is an afterlife, at least for me and you, right? Personal immortality. We don't know. But maybe not. And we have to be reconciled with that possibility in order to love while we are alive. And, what does it mean to love? To live a life of love? Well, it's to live a life of service. It doesn't mean that you sacrifice yourself for the pleasure of others, right? But it does mean that you imitate the divine sacrifice in creating a world whereby you could exist at all. And so in some sense, yeah, it is a sacrifice to live a life of love. But how else are we to make meaning? That's the question. If not by leading a philosophic life, then how?